Welcome to today's talk with Jim Littley and I about digital technologies and the future of work. With the continued post-pandemic acceleration of digital transformation, along with the continued development and deployment of key technologies, including AI, machine learning, generative AI, of course, cloud computing and automation, this leads to questions about the future of work and what it looks like for employers and students coming through today. Welcome, Jim. Jim, for the audience who may not know you, might you give us a little bit of an introduction as to who you are, sir?
Sure, Kieran. Thank you. I spent a career in public accounting over 30 years. Most of that was in the forensic accounting space, but I also dealt with internal audit and regulatory compliance issues. I led a variety of technology teams around continuous auditing and continuous monitoring and data and analytics, and then toward the end started to get involved in robotic process automation. And since about 2018, I've been an adjunct professor at Rutgers University here in New Jersey, in the United States, teaching largely technology-enabled courses relating to accounting, whether it's audit analytics or accounting in a digital era, robotic process automation, etc.
So no better person to cover both the work side and the academic side. So let's see where we're going to meander today, because you and I talk a lot, and we thought we'd share some of our musings to the wider world. So let's see how we get on. Well, what are you seeing and hearing and reading about regarding the future of work, Jim?
Well, I think there are a number of surveys. The most recent one that I can think of is the Microsoft and LinkedIn survey. But a lot of the analysts and consulting firms, Gartner, McKinsey, they do conduct surveys from time to time of CEOs, CFOs, and other leaders in organizations. And it's pretty clear that, as you said, since the pandemic, digital transformation obviously started before the pandemic, but since then, it's really begun to accelerate. And so the skills that they're looking for in their employees are changing as that acceleration continues, right? And so maybe before the pandemic, there was problem solving and critical thinking skills that were high at the list. And you can find these lists through LinkedIn. They do surveys every year around that. Indeed, other companies. But like I said, McKinsey, Gartner, et cetera. So really foundational things, critical thinking, problem solving. The pandemic hit, and then adaptability, right? Because our workforce, our working environment was disrupted, changed dramatically. Then you start to see the importance around data and analytics. That's been around for a while. And now it's started to move beyond that to, in fact, this latest survey around Microsoft and LinkedIn talked about AI and generative AI. And really from two perspectives. Number one, what are employers expecting? How are they seeing the opportunity for the application of AI and Gen AI in their businesses? And what are they looking for employees to help them with that? And then on the employee side, right, there's obviously a lot of concern among employees that maybe don't have those skills that are looking to say, what does this mean for me? Am I going to have a job in the future? What's it going to look like? So I think that's one of the things that we've been talking about is, okay, so we've got, globally or here in the US, lots of employees who have limited technology skills. You've got this digital transformation wave that's hitting them. And they're saying, what do I need to do to reskill and upskill? And then you have students that are going to college, right? And there's all kinds of data around the issues of declining enrollment in the US, the cost of college. There's a question of, is it really worth the cost? Is there value? And, some of the data that I'm seeing is the pandemic obviously caused a drop in enrollment. We're starting to see that tick up, but it's interesting where we're seeing that increase. In two areas of note. Number one, around community colleges and a focus on trades.
Well, can I ask a question, if you don't mind, Jim, then?
Sure.
Probably a couple of things we jump around here. Those are being uptaken in placements in what particular areas? And is that going to address the needs that employers have going forward now and in the future?
Yeah, well, if I understand your question, I think right now, a lot of what I'm hearing and seeing is being taught is really about exposure. You talked about those technologies that are enabling digital transformation, cloud computing, edge computing, blockchain, augmented and virtual reality, et cetera, Internet of Things. There's a lot of technology. And so a lot of focus is on hey, what do these technologies do and how they relate? And I think there's still an opportunity to start to focus in on where and how can these technologies apply, right? And I think that includes not just employees, current employees, but it includes employers. And then obviously future employees, as they're looking and saying, I want to go into finance, or I want to go into accounting or marketing. What skills do I need to have to be successful right from the get-go?
See, that's the interesting bit for me. That and let me get your opinion on this, because it's great to have you in front of you because you're in the real world doing this. Employers want skills that they are aware of, Gen AI and whatever else, I hope now, artificial intelligence, blockchain, but there's going to be things they're not aware of. And if I'm starting a college degree now, that's 2-3 years, higher community college or whatever else. To design that course normally takes a year or two to get it approved through all the goals.
Right.
So technically, when I am going into employment, that could be 3, 4, 5 years later. What's the balance that could be struck to get people ready for the future of work in college, higher education, university, whatever else, to have them future ready, but they do need to be ready for 3 and 4 and 5 years time?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, again, you go back to Gartner and their top strategic technology trends, and I've mapped this since 2017. There are a lot of things that showed up that now have come to fruition. And I think they started, back in 18 around blockchain, and then ultimately they moved to practical blockchain. So there's this hype cycle that I think students need to be careful they don't get caught in the hype cycle. You got to see kind of how does this stuff start to play out. So I think we go back, to answer your question, to the basics, right? And I told you that, this McKinsey survey that I saw, basically employers are saying, hey, it's great if my employees know about Gen AI and how it can impact their job, how it can impact our organization, but just the basic blocking and tackling of data and analytics, right? That thing that we call, back when I was doing this work, 60, 70, 80% of an analytics job was taken up by what we call ETL, extract, transform, and load, right? And so people became very skilled at that. So if you became super skilled at that, now here comes robotic process automation, which is very efficient and effective to do that ETL. Well, you need to move beyond that, right? So I still think we spent so much time transforming the data that we failed to be able to convert the data to information that we can then use to be able to extract insights, actionable insights. So I think you got to get to the basics. If you're a student, you should be looking, and I see this more and more, where programs, business schools, and again, I come from a business perspective. We'll talk about that in a moment, but business schools are starting to develop their data and analytics or business analytics programs. So you're seeing more students take dual majors, finance or marketing, accounting, and business analytics. So I think the basics around data and analytics, converting that data to information, converting information to actionable insights, that's still key. Now you move on to things like artificial intelligence, predictive modeling, machine learning. You need to understand where and how that can be applied. Now, we talked about this earlier. I teach my students from the role of a business analyst, right? I'm not trying to take an accounting major and convert them into a data scientist or a coder or a technology specialist. So you said, well, I'm entering college and I've got 3 or 4 years before I graduate. Where do I go? You do need to pick a lane, right? So if you want to be, in my opinion, a computer scientist, a data scientist, a computer engineer, you pick that. But as you're doing that, supplement that curriculum with, say, some business analytics courses. And most well-rounded programs in the US, if it's a Bachelor of Science, you're going to get that combination, right? If you pick business, then make sure you're getting some technology-focused classes around the core stuff, right? So you got to do that either way. And then as things emerge, we have a number of courses called Special Topics In. And so take some of those courses because they'll give you that vision of, kind of what's coming down the future. What do I need to prepare for? But, again, we talked a little bit ago about a few years ago when I was dealing with robotic process automation, we were looking at repetitive and very specific, repeatable rules-based procedures with RPA, and the critical thinking part was still left to humans. Now, as artificial intelligence continues to develop, and Gen AI now has sprung on since 22, now there's a component of the critical thinking that can be built into RPA, right? So if you're focusing just on building bots, if you will, and really aren't thinking about, well, how and where can Gen AI or AI help make those bots more efficient, more effective, you're missing the boat. So this business analyst role, where you're serving as the bridge between the business owners who know about the risks and opportunities in their business, they know about the systems, the data, the controls, and you're that bridge between the business owners and the technology specialists, right? So what's also happened? Well, it used to be that you would go to a business intelligence group, or you'd go to an ignition center or an innovation center where they've got a bunch of data scientists, and you say, I need you to build me something like this. A few years ago, we started to see this emergence of low-code, no-code software tools. Things like Tableau for visual analytics, things like Alteryx for text mining and analytics and predictive modeling, things like UiPath Studio around robotic process automation, or Celinus around process mining. These tools now can be used by non-technical people. They're low code, no code. So you now see an opportunity for someone that's entering their career or in their career saying, okay, how can I learn these tools to build the prototypes? Because I know the business owners, I know the business processes and controls and systems and data. Let me build these prototypes. I don't need to be a coder. Then, as we industrialize that to make that repeatable, sustainable, scalable, whatever you want to call it, then I'll work with our business intelligence group or our data scientists. So I do think, everybody, regardless of where you are within an organization or where you are majoring in school, you need to be aware of these technologies. And if you want to be a data scientist and you're going to focus heavily on R and Python, great, go for it. Because at the end of the day, those are powerful languages. They have a lot of utility, and that's what data scientists do. But if you're on the business side and you have no interest in becoming a coder, you don't want to learn Python, R, etc., well, then look at some of these low-code, no-code tools to help you accelerate. The one other thing I want to touch on, in that back to the data that I'm seeing, we saw an uptick around community college enrollment. We're also seeing an uptick in graduate school enrollment. And I believe a lot of that is being driven by this technology wave through digital transformation. And employees are saying, how can I upskill and reskill? And they're enrolling in these graduate programs. I see, in the graduate school that I teach, I do have a number of students that have gone right from undergrad into graduate. That's declined over the past 4 or 5 years. I'm now seeing more and more graduate students that have a career. They're working, right? And so that's why we do a lot of a combination of a synchronous, asynchronous learning mode, a hybrid mode, because those students are basically doing that on nights and weekends.
So when you say asynchronous, I call that earn and learn. So in other words, they're out learning most days of the week, and then they come into college.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, see what you're describing there. It's a lot of pressure on higher education institutions, colleges, universities, and whatever else. Is there an opportunity for those colleges to partner with large US or global organizations to, communicate what they need in numbers a year's time, not just a Gartner survey, which are great, Forrester,
Sure.
all those I adore. Is there an opportunity for them to say what they want directly and partner to get those employees that they've got, the students that they're bringing forward, the colleges, ready? And then the second part of that, Jim, is could they partner with colleges to encourage their own current staff to reskill and upskill through an earn and learn program if they don't have one?
Yeah, I absolutely believe there's a huge opportunity for colleges and universities in the US to be able to be that facilitator, right? So you have more and more adjunct professors, if you will, that have come from industry or business, that understand where and how these businesses operate, where and how the technology is relevant. And now you can start to put some structure around some teaching, some courses around that. So I think, as schools invest more in these types of professors, adjuncts that have come from industry, that's going to help. But I think, if we kind of segment it, right, you've got public universities, a school that I teach at, it's a public university, New Jersey, Rutgers University. And then you have private colleges and universities. I think a huge opportunity when you think about the cost of education in the US, and we're seeing this at the community college level. So let me just kind of take your question in a few parts. First, I think the easiest is looking at the community college level. So we've talked about this before. The trades are fantastic, right? So we always need people in the professional trades around plumbing, carpentry, electrician, etc.
And that's traditionally been the community college for those outside.
Well, they've been trade schools at high school, but as people have gone out and now maybe they've worked for 5 or 10 years and they say, you know what, this isn't working for me. Let me change my career path. If they want to get into the trades, they're going to move into a trade school or a community college to do that, right? So in the US, high schools have trade schools. So if you're in high school, you do a little academic work in high school, and then you go to a trade school for the rest of the day. If you've graduated, you're kind of out of luck. And so I think community colleges are starting to fulfill that need, if you will. But I think there's a huge opportunity on the professional side at the community college level. So I just see from friends of mine who have recent graduates, many students are still recent college grads, underemployed or still unemployed, right? And I think unemployed, obviously, it's easy to get a job, whether that's in, the hospitality, restaurant, etc. Underemployment is a bigger challenge, right? And so I think community colleges have an opportunity to say, okay, we can help develop those technical skills that can then go with your undergraduate degree that will make you more marketable if you're looking for a job or a better job, or if you're in a current job, make you more valuable. So I think that's one opportunity. But when you think about kind of the power, and again, where I teach, it's a research university, so there are a lot of smart academics. I'm not an academic. I'm not a professional educator. I'm not a policymaker, right? I'm a retired business professional. As I said, I spent a career mostly in forensic accounting. But at these big public schools, they've got these huge infrastructures that are ready-made for this type of teaching to help employers reskill and upskill their employees. So again, where we are, Rutgers has 3 campuses, but one major campus in New Brunswick, which is kind of in the heart of a lot of life sciences companies. Right along the Route 1 corridor there, you've got Pfizer and multiple J&J organizations and Novo Nordisk, and I'm sure I'm leaving out a bunch. Move up to their newer campus, which is right across the river from Manhattan, tons of global companies across all industries in Manhattan, obviously. And so if you look at my school, Rutgers, and I'm not here speaking on behalf of Rutgers, but there's a huge opportunity just geographically. But you mentioned earlier a lot of the asynchronous learning, right? So it doesn't just have to be synchronous in person. You've got asynchronous learning opportunities. So you don't necessarily have to be there, but I still think some people may prefer synchronous in-person learning, and geographic proximity is pretty important to that. So I think, you've got on the reskill, upskill current employees, I think there's a huge opportunity for colleges and universities in the US to partner with businesses to drive those specific courses around building those skills that we've talked about associated with digital transformation technologies. As it relates to undergrads, I think there's some change that's already been occurring, right? As I mentioned, lots of colleges and universities have added business analytics programs, courses, degrees. Some, it's funny, it used to be a field of concentration. school that my son goes to now used to be a field of concentration. Then it was just a minor, right? And then a few years later, it became a major, right? So there is this transformation process at higher ed to do that. I look at my school, what's happening. So I teach in an accounting program, accounting information systems department. And a few years ago, the AICPA basically put out a paper that said we need to change the accounting curriculum at colleges and universities. We need to really embrace the use of technology, and this needs to be built into the curriculum. And so slowly, a lot of colleges and universities, most, are trying, especially if they've got an accounting program and they're trying to prepare future CPAs. And that's an industry where it's just been plagued with declining enrollments in accounting majors. I think I saw an article, there's going to be 340,000 fewer accountants this year. Why? A lot of retirements and then not enough people coming in. So the accounting profession proactively said, look, we need to embrace changes in our curriculum. We need to change how we're teaching the use of technology. And it's a challenge, though, because, I have friends across the country that teach in different accounting programs. And, in managerial accounting, there's so much to cover just on kind of the foundation that they really struggle with. Well, how can I embed a technology component? And part of it is we really need to rethink how we design these courses such that the course actually has technology embedded right now.
But that requires us to retrain our professors to understand the technology as well. So there's an element of reskilling there. So What would it take, Jim, apart from a burning platform, which is what you're semi-describing there, in other words, a massive shortfall of accountants, what will it take for employers and colleges in the US and higher education and community colleges and everything else? What will it take to get that, heat under their feet to get them to change the curriculum, to jump forward students who are ready, or existing and current employees, more ready for a technology-driven future?
Well, you know what? That's the $100,000 question, right? And, again, you mentioned a burning platform issue, and I'm not sure that we've reached that critical stage yet. I mean, that's really the challenge. So now you look and you say, well, some employers, companies recognize this as a significant business imperative, this being they've got to embrace digital transformation as an organization, and they need to bring their employees along, reskill, upskill, and they need to look for those skills in new employees. They've embraced it. And those are the companies that are going to move more rapidly through that digital transformation and ultimately generate value. And then there are going to be some industries, like you see in accounting, where they may be motivated to say we need to develop more robotic process automation. Why? Because we've got fewer accountants, fewer people, right? So I think, ultimately we're seeing movement, and you mentioned about, retraining college professors. These are all very, very smart folks, right? And they know a lot of the underlying technology that, other than maybe blockchain, but when we think about artificial intelligence, right, and machine learning and predictive modeling, all of that, these guys have been doing research around for years. But I think there's a difference in presenting it in an academic way. Again, when you're trying to teach data scientists and programmers and coders, that's one way. If you're teaching business students to say, hey, look, in addition to learning the rules of finance and accounting and marketing, you also need to understand how technology works. That's huge. One of the things that I think is going to accelerate that is this adoption of the low-code, no-code tools. So instead of spending 2 or 3 years teaching a student to learn Python, they don't learn Python. They learn how to use a low-code, no-code tool that maybe is based on Python or R, but you don't need to worry about being the coder, right? So to the extent that we need to rethink education, and I think that's not just the professors, I think that's the administration, we need to rethink education. And I think that creates the big opportunity for business, because business companies don't want to say, hey, I want to reskill, upskill my employees and put them through 5 years of R and Python coding training and then start to build the business skills around that, right? They want to say, listen, let's cut to the chase. Let's figure out the highest and best use of these technologies and what are the tools. And the tools that we mentioned earlier, are, if you look at Gartner Magic Quadrant or the Forrester Wave, these are leading practice tools, right? And you and I have talked before, Microsoft has moved with their Power BI and Power Automate and their Azure platform, with artificial intelligence. They've zoomed through this as well. And pretty much every company has Microsoft Office 365. Now you have Microsoft Copilot. So all I'm saying is there are plenty of tools that are out there that I think at an academic level, we need to focus more on those tools and teaching students how to use those tools versus, coding. Data scientists need coding, but at the end of the day, why are you teaching a business major Python when there are tools out there that will do it? And by the way, all of these universities can get academic licenses to all of these tools, right? I do them in my courses. I've got academic licenses, all my students do. And they also have really robust interactive lessons and what I call learning assets, the software vendors, right? So we talked about synchronous versus asynchronous. And my hybrid, I have my students learn at their own pace using the software vendors' interactive lessons, learning assets, right? Then in my lectures, whether it's asynchronous or synchronous, I'm showing them where and how to use that. I'm not teaching them necessarily. We're spending class time teaching them how to use a particular tool. I will have office hours where we'll work through case studies and help them if they're struggling with learning the tools. But look, these software vendors know at the end of the day, their challenge is getting people to adopt their technology. How do they get them? They're offering all of these interactive lessons and learning assets. So I think it is a rethinking of how we teach that's going to help accelerate this to get businesses the skilled employees that they need or reskill their current employees, as well as help universities and colleges in the U.S. carve out that role to say, hey, look, we know how to educate people. And we've got all the tools and the infrastructure to be able to do that.
Well, can I ask one final question, and conscious of our time for everyone listening in? Will we need all these learnings when Copilot or a version of it can pretty much take away a fundamental amount of needing to learn the basics, right, and we just leap forward? Now, again, I have a personal opinion on that, but I'd be interested in hearing one of your quick opinions on it.
Well, look, I mean, again, we talked about this earlier, that you think about RPA 5, 6, 7 years ago versus now RPA being enabled by artificial intelligence. So I agree that in 3, 4, 5 years, things like Copilot may be able to do all of the things that they want it to do. Right now, that's just not the reality, right? And so if you, again, go back to the basics around data and analytics, every company has data. Every company has data. Most have big data. They have few people that can analyze that data. Remember, I talked about convert the data to information to actionable insights. So let's deploy the smart AI around the ETL stuff, right? That used to be 70, 80% of the heavy lift. And then keep the humans and the critical thinking around converting the information to actionable insights. So listen, in a few years, we may be having a different conversation, right, around the power of these tools. Right now, if we're thinking about, okay, what do most organizations need now? What do most students need in terms of skills? The things that I'm talking about, I think, are still the most critical. And I would tell you, most companies haven't even reached the level that we're talking about here, just in terms of how to effectively leverage visual analytics. Most of what companies do is they build these dynamic dashboards around a set of questions. I teach my students to use visual analytics around data discovery, data exploration, right? To identify the patterns. Not, the risk is always not in the questions that we know to ask. It's the questions that we don't know to ask, right? And so how are you going to get there? It's through that critical thinking, problem solving, that visual exploration, discovery around the data. That's a very basic thing that's still foreign to many, many companies here in the US, in my opinion.
Yeah, see, it's interesting that as we close today, which is, it goes back to the meme that goes round on the internet, which is a plane gets shot up and the engineers cover up the holes with the plane that got shot, when some smart guy went, that's not the problem, folks. If the plane makes it back with those holes, it's the planes that aren't making it back.
Right.
The holes must be somewhere else. And
Right.
this semi sounds like the same thing. There's
Sure.
a need currently for what I would describe as burning platform and not a dramatic rethink of the skills that we're bringing out our students,
Right.
higher education, college, community groups, what the skills they're coming out with, and a reskilling and a continual reskilling and upskilling of our employees. I love what you said, Jim, in that the infrastructure exists, the expertise and the experience to train a large number of people in a very diligent way. We've very intelligent teachers, professors, community college leaders, and everyone else who are able to do this. And it may not much be so much as back in the day when the technology was complex. Now that the technology has been democratized, for want of a better phrase,
Yes.
now everyone has access to these tools. Jim, you and I will continue on having more conversations.
Great.
But for everyone who's listening in today, thank you so much indeed for taking the time to listen to just some of the parts of the conversation that Jim and I have. And we will release some more over the next coming weeks and months. Thank you, audience. Jim, thank you.
Thank you.